you know, there's this separation between the winning core of the Warriors and what they can do to grind out wins. It's funny. When I was a younger basketball player here in the city of Tucson, and I'd play in the men's leagues and stuff around town, we would frequently lose to older teams that didn't have as much talent as us, but they just kind of knew how to play, right? And that sort of basketball IQ, fierce competitiveness, sheer force of will, whatever your elite top end talent is that your specific team has, you can ride that a certain extent. But at the end of the day, this is a contact sport, and there's a great many physical confrontations taking place on the court. I remember, I'm a Cowboys fan, and I remember in the mid 2010s when their offensive line was so damn good, like they'd roll up into Green Bay to play the Packers. And yeah, they're not as good as Aaron Rodgers and Richard Rodgers and everybody that was on that team, but they would just dominate the line of scrimmage and run the ball wherever they needed to go and chew up clock, dominate time of possession, and they'd win. And it didn't matter what kind of skill advantages that the Packers had or whatever team the Cowboys were playing had. And I've always said that like those physical confrontations, that athleticism, whether that's perimeter defense and containing the ball, crashing the offensive glass or the defensive glass, running up and down the floor in transition, all of those things are the physical battles that take place on the basketball court. And if you lose all of those, you have to be damn near perfect everywhere else. And, Denver has a lot of athletes on the roster. Peyton Watson, just again, how many times in the NBA do we have to see, whether it's, a guy like Peyton Watson, what we've seen, just Jonathan Kuminga with the Warriors flying around here the second half of the season, on the Lakers, guys like Jared Vanderbilt or guys like Wenyen Gabriel. We see this archetype of player around the league. And as if you're taller than 6'7" and you're athletic and you just play your ass off, you can impact the game of basketball in a lot of different ways just by flying around. Peyton Watson was everywhere in the second half of this game, making plays just with his length and athleticism. Christian Braun, Bruce Brown, that Denver bench is athletic. And here's the thing with that Warriors roster, even though they've added Gary Payton, now the reality is without Andrew Wiggins, they're a significantly below average team in the NBA from the standpoint of athleticism. And you can win and overcome that. You just have to be perfect. We're going to get into this a little bit deeper when we talk about the Mavericks later on in the show. But like Steph and Clay couldn't make a three in this game. I think they were 6 for 26 up until that the final sequence. I can't remember what they actually finished as, but they weren't shooting very well. And if they're not going to shoot well, they can't overcome those physical disadvantages. Same thing with Kyrie and Luka. Kyrie and Luka have to be damn near perfect to make up for the limitations that they have elsewhere on the roster. It's just a lot to ask. And, again, I think we've seen a lot of this narrative with the Nuggets as it pertains to Jokic's MVP case, trying to minimize the talent that's on this Denver roster. And the reality is it's a lot of the same issues that I've been talking about with the Lakers having to do with staggering. They play their starters together all the time, and then they bring in these line shift bench groups. And as a result, those groups really struggle because they don't have nearly enough talent, because they don't stagger their players very well. They do occasionally, but not nearly as much as some of the other teams in the league. And so you get these absurd point differentials. I'm sure some of you guys who were listening to the NBA TV broadcast tonight, they had a graphic that they put up on the screen showing what the Nuggets are when Jokic is on the floor and what the Nuggets are when Jokic is off the floor. And you'll see differentials there with the best players in the league often. That's normal. They're your best player. And obviously in the NBA, the singular best player on your team has more impact on winning than just about any other team sport. And so obviously removing that kind of guy off the floor, you're going to see a drop off that goes around the entire league, regardless of which player we're talking about. But the reality is Denver, even though it doesn't have the same kind of big names that you see in some of these other supporting casts, like when you go to the Bucks, Brook Lopez and Drew Holiday and Chris Middleton, they're a little bit more renowned around the league, right? When you go to Philly, James Harden obviously is considered a superstar, even if he's probably on the tail end of that side of things. Tyrese Maxey was off the charts good again tonight with his shot making. He's a guy that you think of as like a star guard. So you think of those rosters as more talented, and I think they are probably. but not much. And the truth is that that Denver roster has a lot of professional NBA starting level basketball players that complement Nikola Jokic extremely well. And they do have a good amount of size on the perimeter. What's Golden State's biggest weakness? Perimeter size, right? Especially without Andrew Wiggins. Without perimeter size, you buy opportunities to shoot over the top for people, right? So, like, if the Warriors have to put Jonathan Kuminga to try to handle a guy like Jamal Murray on any given possession, then guess what? Michael Porter Jr. is going to be isoing Steph Curry, and Steph competes defensively and he puts in all the effort. But the reality is if Steph contests a Michael Porter Jr. hesitation pull-up three, he's not bothering that shot. He's just not. He's just giving up too many inches there, right? So, like, Michael Porter Jr. just consistently getting to his spots and elevating and knocking shots down. Aaron Gordon as a do-everything forward. Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, one of the most professional two guards that you have in the league that just does everything well that you need in a supporting player on an NBA roster. They have a lot of talent, a lot of athleticism. This is a good team. And guess what? Jamal Murray, he's capable of hitting all of the high-level shots that the other stars around the league hit. This game kind of got off the rails there in that early fourth quarter. Who was it that was hitting the shots? It was Jamal Murray flying through, I think it was an elevator screen at the top of the key and knocking down a shot, or the Nuggets forcing a turnover and Jamal Murray dribbling down the floor and pulling up from three. I think, I don't know how many times we have to see this, whether it's with the Lakers and how bad they looked with LeBron James and Anthony Davis and a bunch of like terrible role players versus good NBA starter level role players, or this Warriors team who has struggled so much this season compared to last season because of just dropping two significant role players that they used to count on. Third, if you count for Andrew Wiggins getting out of the lineup. We just, in NBA history, we've way too frequently applied too much credit to stars. They absolutely are the determining factor for a team's ceiling. That goes without saying, but you do need good basketball players down the roster, and Denver has a lot of really good basketball players. And that's why, as of right now, if the season were to end today, I mean, we'll see how things go with the Lakers and matchups and Andrew Wiggins. I saw a report yesterday that potentially he's returned to the Bay Area. I don't know if that means he's nearing a return to the team or not. Apparently he had been out of San Francisco before that, right? So, like, obviously some things can shake up at the bottom of the West, but right in the Suns won again tonight in Oklahoma City. Kevin Durant looked amazing. Big shock that that poor shooting night the other night was an anomaly. So there are teams in the bottom that could potentially enter this mix, but Denver to me remains the safest bet for the time being until we see a matchups, because they just have that top tier superstar. They've got the supporting players that fit perfectly with him. They have home court advantage, and statistically speaking, one of the best home court advantages in sports because of elevation. They're just in a really good spot. And that's why if the season were to, if I had to make a pick right now, I think the Nuggets are the safest pick, even though there are lots of threats in the conference.